I'm going to read about the parable of the great feast on night 337. This is going to be from Luke chapter 14, verses 15 through 24. Starting in verse 15, it says, "When one of those at the table with him heard this, he said to Jesus, 'Blessed is the one who will eat at the feast in the kingdom of God.' Jesus replied, 'A certain man was preparing a great banquet and invited many guests. At the time of the banquet, he sent his servant to tell those who'd been invited, 'Come, for everything is now ready.' But they all alike began to make excuses. The first one said, 'I have just bought a field and I must go see it. Please excuse me.' Another said, 'I have just bought 5 yoke of oxen and I'm on my way to try them out. Please excuse me.' And still another said, 'I just got married, so I can't come.' The servant came back and reported this to his master. Then the owner of the house became angry and ordered his servant, 'Go out quickly into the streets and alleys of the town and bring in the poor, the crippled, the blind, and the lame.' 'Sir,' the servant said, 'what you ordered has been done, but there is still room.' Then the master told his servant, 'Go out to the roads and country lanes and compel them to come in, so that my house will be full. I tell you, not one of those who were invited will get a taste of my banquet.'" And let's look at what the Application Study Bible says about this. It says, "The man sitting at the table with Jesus envisioned the glory of God's kingdom, but he did not yet understand how to have a share in it. In Jesus' story, many people turned down the invitation to the banquet because the timing was inconvenient. And we too can resist or delay responding to God's invitation. And our excuses may sound reasonable: work duties, family responsibilities, financial needs, or other reasons. Nevertheless, God's invitation is the most important event in our lives, no matter how inconveniently it may be timed. Are you making excuses to avoid responding to God's call in your life? Jesus reminds us the time will come when God will pull his invitation and offer it to others. Then it will be too late to get into the banquet. That's some sobering words there, but it's true. For additional context, specifically as it relates to verse 16 that I read, Luke chapter 14, verse 16, I thought this was interesting. The Application Study Bible says, "The custom was to send 2 invitations to a party, the first to announce an event, and the second to tell guests that everything was ready." The guests in Jesus' story insulted the host by making excuses when he issued the second invitation. In Israel's history, God's first invitation came from Moses and the prophets. The second came from his son, Jesus. The religious leaders accepted the first invitation. They believed that God had called them to be his people, but they insulted God by refusing to accept his son. Thus, as the master in the story sent his servant into the street to invite the needy to his banquet, so God sent his son to the whole world of needy people to tell them that God's kingdom had arrived and was ready for them. I think that's so interesting as Jesus is speaking to parallels from the Old and the New Testament. And he had such a way with parables, with stories, and so much intention to speak to very specific details. And I just wonder in those moments if the Pharisees and those that had gathered around to listen to Jesus speak, I wonder if they actually absorbed a lot of that or if they were confused. But one time, I think it was C.S. Lewis once said, like, doctors do the same thing. In fact, a lot of us do when we're when we're trying to explain something when we try to explain very difficult things. For example, a doctor does this when instead of saying, hey, like, there's a 4.8 centimeter tumor in the L3 vertebrae. I don't even know if that's a term, but instead of talking like doctor speak, they'll say things like, hey, the tumor's about the size of a grape. And then you understand what they're talking about. Jesus often told stories in a way that people could understand and receive them and make sense of them and apply them to their life. So I love the stories he told. I think there's so much that we can glean from them. But again, Luke chapter 14, verses 15 through 24. I wanted to talk about the parable of the great feast tonight on day 337.